Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is day 221, Saturday, October 14th, 2017. Thank you so much for tuning in to this early weekend edition of TowerGate. I actually got this video up on a Saturday morning. How about that? Instead of 11 o'clock at night. Well, back to Las Vegas. This is the story that is just never going to end, and I have to say that I've seen a lot of bad cover-up, deep state operations in my time. This has got to be the worst. Absolutely the worst. Well, we'll keep following this. And so, I guess the top story today, many of you have heard, it actually broke on Friday. I guess we should ask the question, has anyone seen Jesus Campos? The hero of Las Vegas. Has anyone seen Jesus Campos? Appears he's gone missing. He canceled interviews with he had five confirmed scheduled TV appearances, and he canceled them all, including Sean Hannity. Now, according to the head of his union, they were actually in a room, and he says, quote, "We were in a room, and when we came out, he was gone. Poof. He disappeared, like Casper." So has anyone seen Jesus Campos, the hero of Las Vegas? Or at least that's what they're telling us. You know, the private security guard that was working at the Mandalay Bay, despite the fact that he was not registered with the state agency that requires that you register as a security guard. He was not registered. Not only that, it appears that his entire employee records have been scrubbed from the system at Mandalay Bay. It's very strange. We know Laura Loomer has been out to his house twice. You know, I told you about that Corvette he had in his driveway yesterday. She got a closer look at it on the second time she went back. The registration date on the tag is from 2007. Hasn't registered those plates in 10 years, yet you're looking at a very nice Chevy Corvette that looks to be about 2 years old at the most. And she also learned recently, according to friends and family who would speak to her, that that is his car. Jesus Campos, driving a car that's more expensive than his house. Very, very nice car for a security guard. Very nice car. And he's not even a security guard, at least not a legal one. And now he's disappeared. And it appears his family has been placed under a gag order. They have nothing to say, and they still have their private security guy at the house, guarding the house. And of course we know that his firm, their business license expired in Nevada in January of 2017. They're operating illegally as well. My. This story just gets stranger and stranger all the time. Why not? Because it is a story. It's a fairy tale. It's an absolute fairy tale. Don't know how long they can keep this up. I mean, let's look at the facts. Can you be any more incompetent? Can you screw up any bigger than what they did earlier this week? Think about it. For a solid week, 6 days, they told us that the hero, Jesus Campos, came up to the 32nd floor and the shooter was firing, and at some point they suspect that the shooter, because of his video surveillance he had set up, saw Mr. Campos and turned around and fired 200 shots through the door, injuring Mr. Campos in the leg. And then we're told that's what stopped the shooting. And so he was looked at as being a hero because he stopped the shooter. This is the narrative we were fed for 6 days. And then they come out and say, well, we want to make a change. Actually, what happened was he was shot before the main shooting began. And so we just want to make that correction so that narrative has changed. And then, of course, they changed the timeline. How do you get that wrong? How do you get that wrong? He's the very probably most important key witness. You know they talked to him, probably wrote down everything he said, but somehow, a week later, the story changes. Who changed their story? Did Jesus Campos change his story? Or did the FBI, who's leading the investigation, change their story? Something happened here. And it dispels the narrative that he stopped the shooter. So if this didn't happen, and he was shot prior to the main shooting, then what did stop the alleged shooter from stopping his shooting? They've never answered that question. My, what a mess. And they still have no motive. 12 days. Looking for a motive. This is not real police work, my friends. This is not real investigative police work. First of all, the motive is, the motive is somewhat important. Yeah, you kind of want to know why he did or why someone would do what they do when they commit a crime like this. But really, if you're conducting an investigation, you don't look at a potential suspect based on circumstantial evidence and go right to the question, what was his motive, before you've actually nailed down that he is the target. You see, we have to remember that no one actually saw Mr. Paddock firing those shots. No one actually saw him firing those shots. The evidence we have is circumstantial. They entered the room, and he's there in the shooter's nest with all the weapons. So it's circumstantial evidence. Now, it's very good circumstantial evidence, but especially in this type of a crime, unless you have an actual eyewitness or you've got it on video, and remember, they told us he had video equipment up there, but he did not record anything. Unless you have actually eyewitness, you have circumstantial evidence. This is what we have. That's the case against Mr. Paddock, who's now been cremated. Nothing left to him now but ashes. I wonder who identified the body. We assume his brother. Circumstantial evidence. And based on that, they go from circumstantial evidence into, in their mind, that this is absolute conclusive evidence, as if they have an eyewitness or have it on video, and then they go looking right for the motive. This is the problem with this investigation. They've skipped a few steps. What they should have asked are 3 other questions before they started playing around with trying to figure out this puzzle about motive. They should first put together a list of people who would have benefited from this crime. Who would have benefited from this crime? Cui bono? Who benefits? First question any real investigator would ask. It comes before the motive. The motive comes later. Once you've identified the person, then you can begin to pinpoint the motive. But the first thing you do is you ask the question, who would have benefited from this crime? Now that should produce a list of various people who would have benefited from this crime. Certainly that would include Mr. Adelson. Certainly that would include anyone who would have benefited financially from this crime. Anyone who would have benefited politically from this crime. And that gives us a pretty good long list of people, doesn't it? Mr. Chertoff, the same guy who after 9/11 was able to get his body scanners in all the airports. He's the same guy who let the dancing Israelis go. Then his company secures a multi-billion-dollar contract to put these scanners in all the airports. Mr. Chertoff looks like he's going for a second helping of that $1 billion in contracts. The first was so lucrative, why not? That's just two people that you can put on your list of who would have benefited from this crime. How about you look at the stock of MGM Grand and see if any large amounts of shares were sold within 30 days of the event. If you look at that and you put that list together, law enforcement folks, you will find that the president, the CEO, as well as all the chairmen of the board sold a total of $200 million worth of MGM stock in the weeks prior to this attack. You will also find a couple of the companies that manufacture bullets have had a recent surge in their stock price. You also find that Mr. Adelson's company and Mr. Chertoff's company have had a recent spike in their stock. Just like in 9/11 when we saw the put options placed on American Airlines and United Airlines, the same exact thing is happening here. Hundreds of millions of dollars are being made by these individuals right now. Collectively, billions of dollars were made by selling these shares of stock, as well as the amount of stock gains on corporations who would benefit from this event. So my suggestion to law enforcement is put together your list of people who would benefit from this event. Then, once you've got that list together, you go down and narrow it down. You say, okay, of all these people on this list who may have benefited, who would have had the opportunity to pull off an event like this? You've got the list of who benefits. Next thing you do is go down the list and check off who may have had the opportunity to pull off an event like this. That should eliminate some people and get a check by other people. Then you ask a third question: who would have had the capability to pull off an event like this? That would eliminate some people and leave check marks by some other people. That is the folks that you want to start looking at. Those people with the 3 check marks, they would have benefited, they would have had the opportunity, and they would have had the capability to pull off this event. Then you begin investigating these people, and you begin thinking about motive. Then you may take a look, like I said, at how they may have benefited, stock, political gains, various other types of ways that they may have gained, company mergers, things and such. Follow the money, follow the power, and you will come up with a list of some people. My guess is you start looking into those people to see who they're connected to, what sort of activity they were involved in, what sort of people they might have been communicating with, and what sort of activities they were involved in. Pretty soon, you're going to come up with a short list. And from that short list, you will probably find the perpetrators. Now, the last photo I saw of Mr. Paddock, he doesn't look like someone who would have benefited. He certainly doesn't fit the profile based on what most people who know about him say. You could say he had the opportunity, but why would he want it? He was a millionaire who spent most of his days gambling and drinking and philandering with prostitutes that were offered him free of charge because he was a VIP member of MGM. Despite the fact that he was hitting their casinos since the 80s for what we're told was millions and millions of dollars. This guy's hitting the casinos for millions and millions of dollars since the 1980s, yet they allow him to come into their casinos and continue to soak them for millions and millions of dollars. That does not happen. The casinos know you come there to play a game of chance. Every now and then, someone wins. Most of the time, the overwhelming amount of time, the house wins. When someone comes into a casino and starts beating the house on a regular basis, they watch him like a hawk. And they call all the other casinos and they watch him like a hawk. They get him on video surveillance. And if they catch him counting cards or using algorithms or anything else, they'll throw him out for life, ban him. And even if they can't find it, they'll just walk up and say, no, you're so damn good, we can't catch you. But we know you're beating the house all the time. We don't know what you're doing. We can't find it. But we'll tell you this. If you ever walk back in here again, see those big guys over there? They're going to toss you out on your ass. Don't come back. That's what happens when you beat the house to death. And we're told he's been doing it since the 80s. And based on that, he's got a VIP membership. Free drinks. Of course, he don't take the free drinks because he don't like to pay the tips. Instead, what we've learned, he brings his own bottle. Drinks and gambles. Plays around with those free prostitutes that he gets as being a VIP member. Takes cruises. Seemed like a pretty damn good life for a 64-year-old retired man who just liked to gamble and drink. Did he have the capability? Well, again, no one ever said he was really interested in people who knew him pretty well. Didn't even know he even cared about guns. No one ever knew him to be a hunter, a target shooter. He wasn't ex-military. Didn't spend a lot of time at the gun range. They didn't find a lot of gun magazine paraphernalia around him. He wasn't subscribed, as far as we could tell, by mail order. He may have been online, but he scrubbed his online presence. That's a technique that you would learn from intelligence people. Fact of the matter is, they're trying to find motive. Doesn't look like to me that Mr. Paddock meets any of this criteria. But there's a lot of other people who do. And that's who they should be focusing on if they were really interested in resolving this investigation. But that's not the purpose. The purpose is to cover up the crime. The real shooter is probably up in the penthouse in the Mandalay Bay Hotel under complete armed guard, where he has been since he walked out of the room after shooting Mr. Paddock, doing his part. He's probably up in the penthouse right now with some prostitutes, having a good time, being protected by the feds. They're waiting for this to die down. And then here in a few days or so, he'll sneak down the service elevator, hop into a limo, and off he'll go into the sunset. And we will still be left with the false narrative, a motive that doesn't work or can't be found, someone who would not have benefited from this whatsoever unless you consider taking a bullet in the mouth as being a benefit, getting your brains blown out all over the carpet, bullets laying on top of the blood. What a mess. I want to comment now on something that one of my subscribers, recent subscribers, made a very interesting comment on one of my videos. He said, hey, you know what? If you look at some photos of Mr. Paddock, you'll see that he has some sort of a tattoo right here on his neck. It's not like a colorful tattoo or anything like that. It actually looks like a faded black tattoo. Like it was black at one point, but it's faded over time. And I never noticed this, but I went and looked at a bunch of images of Mr. Paddock. And as the commenter pointed out, and I'm sorry I can't remember your name. I give you credit, but anyway, your comment was fantastic, and I did do just as you asked. I did look into this. And sure enough, if you go back and look at a bunch of photos of Mr. Paddock, you will see that he has something tattooed right here. It looks to me like the number 13. You can't see it all because it goes down into his shirt line. But you can clearly see the 1, looks like a 1 and a 3. Looks like the number 13 tattooed on his neck, and it's like a faded tattoo that was just like in black and white. It wasn't like a color tattoo. It's kind of, you can't see it very well. It's kind of subtle, but if you know what to look for, then you can see it. And it's in quite a few of these older photos of him. Someone actually took and blew a photo up so you get a really big version of it, and you really can see it then when it's blown up. Then you look at his death photo, laying there with his blood all over him and his mouth open, one eye closed. You can see he's clearly been shot in the mouth. Dried blood along with wet blood all around him. Rigor mortis setting in, as you can tell by the lower chin and mouth area, suggesting that he may have been shot at 2 different times. Kind of what that looks like. But the bottom line is, regarding what the commenter was telling me to look at, the tattoo. And clearly you can see on the dead man in the photo that they're telling us was Stephen Paddock, ain't no sign of any tattoo anywhere. It's a great picture because he's laying back like this and you got a clear shot. His entire neck is exposed. There ain't nothing, not even a shadow, no hint whatsoever of any tattoo. Now, one of 2 things is going on. Either number 1, someone has taken Photoshop with the airbrush tool and airbrushed this number 13 tattoo on his neck on a bunch of photos and put them out on the internet because they want to play with our head, get some clicks on their, Facebook page, or clicks on their Instagram, or clicks on their YouTube video, or whatever. It's a possibility. This could be a Photoshop trick and it's just someone playing with our heads. Or he really could have had this tattoo that says, looks like number 1, and you can see almost like the number 3, but you'd have to pull the shirt down to be able to see everything. But you can clearly see something there. And in the photo that's blown up and enhanced, you can really see it. And in the photo of the dead man that we're told is Stephen Paddock, you can clearly see a good neck shot. Nothing on his neck. So very good observation by that commenter on my previous YouTube video. I believe it was day 219 or 220, video day 219, 220 in the comments section. So yes, I did look at it and I see exactly what you're talking about. No question about it. And the only question is, was the tattoo that we are seeing, because it's definitely there on the other photos, but it's not there on the death photo. Did he really have this tattoo, or is it a Photoshop job after the fact for someone to get some clicks or to just spread another rumor? Could be government disinformation. Could be anything. I don't know. But if in fact it is not a Photoshop job, if he really did have this tattoo, and that will be interesting to follow up on, some people might know about that. His girlfriend would probably know. Some other people might know whether or not he actually had this tattoo on his neck. That's something someone should look into who's on the ground there in Las Vegas talking to people. If it turns out he did actually have this tattoo, then that photo of him, the dead man that they're telling us is Stephen Paddock, is not Stephen Paddock, because there ain't a damn thing on his neck in that death photo, and you can see it clearly. Thank you so much, commenter, subscriber, for bringing attention to that. I appreciate it. And now I've shared it with everyone else. And if you all want to go take a look at it, I suggest just go to Google, type in Stephen Paddock, click on images, take a look at all the images. You will see it. And then you can determine whether or not you think that this tattoo was real or if it was photoshopped. I'm going to probably try to contact Laura Loomer because she's in Vegas on the ground talking to people. And I believe she's actually reached out and actually contacted some people's family members of Mr. Campos. She's talked to some people in the hotels and casinos down there. She's made some good contacts. Maybe someone there will be able to tell her whether or not they ever noticed this tattoo. Because if people will tell her, yeah, people who actually knew him, yeah, he did have that tattoo on his neck. If that happens, then that photo of the man we're being told is Stephen Paddock, and the death photo is not Stephen Paddock. Now some regular TowerGate news. The FBI has been ordered by a judge to turn over newly discovered documents, which were essentially emails, on the Clinton Lynch Tarmac meeting. This is the result of Judicial Watch probing and probing and probing, they finally turned up the 30 additional pages of emails and other conversation. 30 additional pages. And the Department of Justice tried to withhold that, but the judge ruled that the FBI must turn over these 30 pages to Judicial Watch. We should be hearing about what's in them 30 pages here pretty soon, and I'm sure members of Congress will be getting their hands on them as well, because as we know, Loretta Lynch is going to be coming in for an interview in Congress here in the next week or two. And I was just talking about that, and I believe that I was telling you about this yesterday. I believe that these are the emails and the conversations that happened after the tarmac meeting was discovered. It was supposed to be a secret, then it was discovered by a local TV news station, and that's the next action was for someone at the TV station to call the Department of Justice and let them know that one of the reporters at that news station had stumbled onto the secret meeting and it wasn't going to be a secret anymore, at which point this got people at the Justice Department, FBI, certain people whose names we're now probably going to learn, got them talking about how they should handle this situation, how they should cover it up. So another big win for Tom Fitton and Judicial Watch, and we're going to learn a lot more about those conversations. Well, we're now learning something else. After the Las Vegas shooting, the cops went and got cell phones from a lot of people who had cell phone footage of the shooting. They wanted to use it to help put together their evidence. And these citizens who were witnesses, who captured it on their cell phones, their camera phones, were happy to oblige. Well, yesterday, the Las Vegas Police Department and the FBI returned all the phones to all those witnesses. We don't know how many there were, but they returned all those phones to all those people who had submitted their phones freely to help with the investigation. And we're now learning that every one of those people got their cell phones back with all the data erased. They erased all the footage. Gave them back their cell phones, but they erased all the footage. And a lot of these witnesses are very unhappy. That was their footage. They took it. They thought it was theirs. They were happy to share it, to be used as information to help with the investigation, to find the perps. But they got their cell phones back and they have been wiped. Not just the video, but any of their conversations that they had with people about the event. Wiped. I wonder why. MGM Resorts has now hired a crisis management firm. And they did this after they said the sheriff held a head-scratching press conference. Yeah, it is a little head-scratching when you change the freaking timeline and one of the most important key details. Yeah, that'll get your head scratching. And yes, they do need a crisis management firm because they do have a crisis on their hands. And it's going to get bigger. My. The Rotten Reverend Clinton is now saying that climate change caused the wildfires. Well, you know, those wildfires have been happening out in California for a very, very long time, Reverend Clinton. California is basically a very arid place. About half of the state is a fucking desert. They also have a problem there with environmental policy. They will not allow anyone to go in and clean up all the dead and dried foliage on the forest floor. So whenever there is a lightning strike or some numbnuts comes along and decides to start a fire, throw down a pack of matches or whatever, or some fool throws down a lit cigarette or something and starts a forest fire, it catches like crazy because they will not go in and clean out the dead scrub on the floor of the forest. You also have a problem in California. You get those Santa Ana winds. You also get those winds blowing off the Sierra Nevadas, which can blow in gusts up to 40 to 50 miles per hour. And sometimes they knock down a power line. And when the power line falls, hits the ground, especially if it's in a forested area, it starts a fire and it spreads like crazy. And with those 40-mile-an-hour winds, pretty soon it's out of control. It's been happening in California for decades. For decades. Just like in the spring, in the Midwest and in the South, we have the tornadoes. Tornado belt happens every spring. Some years it's worse than others. We have hurricanes in the hurricane season. It's been happening for decades, for hundreds of years probably, thousands of years. And if I could remind the Reverend Clinton that during the 90s, when her husband was the president and she was the first lady, here in Ohio, we had a 100-year flood. Worst flood in 100 years. Happened while her husband was the president. We also had a very, very bad string of tornado years here. 93, 94, 96. Horrible tornado breakouts. The years that her husband was president. The wildfires in California have nothing to do with climate change. You moron. Twitch McConnell. The pressure is building on Twitch. We are now learning from people whispering behind the scenes that there's a move afoot, underway, behind the scenes to force Twitch out. He's been a dismal failure. He's a hardcore anti-Trumper. He's backing Bob Corker and Senator Magoo and Lindsey Candy Pants Graham and all the rest, doing everything he can to thwart the agenda, and everybody knows it. Twitch is under major pressure right now. If he fails, if he lasts that long, if he fails on this tax reform bill, he's gone. Bye, Twitch. Well, the rotten reverend can't keep her mouth shut. Here's another rotten reverend comment. She just will not go away. And she said this, she was on the BBC. She's on the BBC, and she says, yeah, we have an admitted sex assaulter in the White House. Can't believe she said that on the BBC, and that the reporter she was talking to couldn't help but look at her and go, yeah, but back when your husband was president, he was like, known to be kind of a sex assaulter as well, wasn't he? To which point Clinton's like, oh, well, that was in the past. That's all been adjudicated. It was in the past. While currently, he's still a big a pervert as he ever was. He's got the Energizer Bunny. Her chief of staff's husband is going to prison for being a pervert. Her campaign head guy is believed to be a pedophile. Her good friend Harvey Weinstein is now in Europe getting therapy for his sex addiction, while more and more women come out of the woodwork to claim rape and other things. She's surrounded by these people. Yet she has the gall to say that Trump is an admitted sex assaulter. He has not ever admitted to sexual assault, nor do I think he's ever been found guilty of it. Yeah, he talked about grabbing a pussy, but he was talking to one guy. It wasn't intended for public consumption. And he was making the point that when you're rich, like him, women don't care. If you're rich, you can go up and grab them that way. If you're not rich, like me, you'll probably get slapped. Not that I would ever do that, but, that's the point he was making. Now, I know a lot of you think I forgot Dumbass of the Week, the new segment I've been wanting to do. It just so happened that the second time this segment came around, because I wanted to do it on Mondays, because it's usually a slow news day coming off a Sunday. So I was going to do it on Mondays, but if you remember what happened on that Monday, it was a Las Vegas shooting the night before. So it sucked all the oxygen out of the room, and it literally never made it. I had a lot of things I was going to talk about last week that simply didn't make it in my TowerGate video because the Las Vegas shooting dominated, and still is pretty much dominating the conversation right now. But I did make a selection for Dumbass of the Week. So let's go ahead, 5 days too late, but let's go ahead and before the week's up, go ahead and cover our Dumbass of the Week. And this guy, I'll give you his name and tell you the whole story, but there's one of these guys in every community, probably a bunch of these guys, and many of you have probably dealt with these types of people before. But our Dumbass of the Week is Mr. Peter LaPelli. 50 years old, from New Jersey. Now his son was the quarterback in a pee-wee football team. A team for 6 to 8 year old kids. Little kids are real cute playing pee-wee football. I've watched